First of all, thank you very much for the beautiful remarks made by the introducer on myself. And indeed, it is a great pleasure for me to be here today, and especially in front of most esteemed generals, admirals, and air marshals who have served in the past, and in front of this highly intellectual and academic audience. Ambassador Surgeon Shinoy, members of the Executive Council, respected colleagues, distinguished attendees, a very good morning to all to you. I have just concluded a session at the National Defense College. It was a quite informative and inspirational session, and in fact, you might my voice might sound a little bit tiring, but then I will try my best to see what we can do together. The Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis is one of the premier institutes in our line of work. It is a center dedicated for research, inquiry, and informed debate about security, strategy, and defense-related matters. This institute has provided a very vibrant, enriching, and educative forum. I thank the Director General, Ambassador Shinoy, for the wonderful opportunity, and everyone involved in facilitating this event. I have chosen to focus on national security, challenges and dynamics, and the unique peculiarities of the security predicament of these small island developing states. I have set about 20 to 25 minutes for my remarks actually. I am more interested in learning about what you think of the topic and learning from all of you here today. I will cover some of the underlying themes when we talk about small states and security, and then narrow it down to the Maldives context. When we say small states, what is the yardstick we use to define this smallness? Where we can draw a balance, perhaps how we can overcome the dilemma of the relativity. It is based on geography, resources, economic and military might, diplomatic influence, population, or is it a mix of all these factors? Due to the traditional focus on major powers, the issue of small states has long been neglected. Some authors argue that smallness is, as I said, relative. For example, Bangladesh is smaller than India, and Maldives is smaller than Bangladesh. I have not intentionally kept out Sri Lanka from here, but even if we include Sri Lanka, I think it will become more and more complex. The research focus has by and large been on trying to establish some variables that can be used to measure smallness. What could be a criteria? Whether it would be a qualitative criteria or whether it can be a quantitative criteria that can determine the actual definition of smallness or perhaps the small state. I offer two working definitions for your consideration. One, small states are states that are economically, politically, and militarily weak with small populations and small territories. This definition focuses on capabilities or the lack of it. An alternative definition may be that small states are states which recognize that they are not capable of obtaining security without relying on other states, institutions, or certain established processes. This definition, in contrast, looks at configuration and exercise of power. This distinction is very important because a state may lack the physical attributes of larger states, but it can have strategic significance which can be leveraged against larger states. Notwithstanding these definitions, measuring smallness has never been an issue for Maldives because everyone else is actually bigger than Maldives. So we talk about a country whose territory is 99.7% is the ocean, which makes the Maldives in itself geographically unique. So if you ever happen to visit Maldives, for example, Going from the airport to your hotel, you may have to take a boat. You will have to take a boat, generally speaking. And then perhaps from your hotel, even if you want to go to the hospital, perhaps on an emergency, again, you will have to take a boat. So we live in a country that is surrounded by the ocean. When the territory of the country is overwhelmingly waterbound, you can then imagine we are considered as half fish and half humans. Before we move on to the security vulnerabilities of small states, and I assure you there are many, let us briefly talk about the security needs of such states. At its core, small states have two overarching concerns. First is the issue of influence. Small states seek influence over their neighbors, major regional and international powers, influence over international institutions and the wider international system. Second is autonomy, the ability to determine and conduct their affairs without interference. This is perhaps quite theoretical. Influence and autonomy are not always complementary. When small states join with larger states, they may exercise more influence but must sacrifice autonomy. Small states that are part of regional or multilateral institutions may also be compelled to go along with dominant states, even they may not entirely fully agree to it. Small states need a stable international order and a similar regional order. A norm-based system with international organizations and larger states providing guarantees for the system is essential. This is something Maldives realized early on, and it's the reason why Maldives is, despite its small size, is a leading figure in international and regional diplomacy. Maldives held a seat at the UN Human Rights Council from 2015 to 2018 and bid for a seat at the UN Security Council for the current term. Maldives always play a key role in small island developing states. Maldivian diplomatic effort is centered on issues that are essential to our security and well-being. It is for this reason that Maldives play a leading role in the international fight against climatic change and global warming. Looking out from where we are, we see the international environment is being extremely turbulent and volatile today, filled with uncertainty, with multi-layered complexities, with incomplete and ambiguous information sharing, and information rather. I think this strategic conundrum is common to all of us working in this field, past and present. I can't even imagine Chanakya, the famed Indian strategist, waking up one fine morning and thinking how easy his job was and how he had complete the perfect information he needed to advise the emperor then. The job of strategic thinkers has always been to muddle through the complexities and coming out with practical and pragmatic solutions. The strategic predicament of small states is made more dire because small states do not have the resources, the required capabilities and institutional capacity of effectively respond to threats and challenges existing in the international arena. Small states often have economies that are less diversified and hence more vulnerable and extremely delicate. Small populations also do not support economies of scale, and a lot of economically viable projects in larger populations need to be supported through government subsidies. I mentioned resources, capacities, and capabilities, but we must first look at what are the security vulnerabilities of small states, and more specifically, what are the vulnerabilities and challenges of Maldives. The first and almost an existential threat is that posed by global warming, which is the traditional thought, climatic change, and of course the sea level rise. I don't intend to go too deep into the science of this, but I would just like to highlight the recent report that was released by IPCC, which focused on the environmental effects of a rise in temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We are expected to reach 1.5 benchmark in the next 15 to 20 years, and what scientists had predicted would happen at 2 degrees, which we had conveniently ignored and pushed back to the latter half of this century, becomes present and imminent in our lifetimes. All the major impacts ranging from loss of sea, ice and glacial cover, species loss, severe droughts and famines, sea level rise and coastal flooding well, everything is expected to happen. The hardest hit would be small states like Maldives. Our economy is entirely dependent on tourism. And even now, every year, huge swathes of our coral reefs turn white and lose the marine life. This was widely witnessed in 1990, especially when we had all of our reefs went into a process of coral bleaching. This is caused by warming of ocean acidification. Directly linked to this is our economic ability to afford the imports we need, ranging from almost all food items, clothing, constructional material, and everything else. The other issue I would like to touch very briefly on is the issue of violent extremism and, of course, terrorism. The government of Maldives recognizes terrorism as a serious threat to national security. Just over 2 months back, the reality of this menace was brought home by the horrendous and inhumane acts in Sri Lanka. Of course, India, unfortunately, is all too familiar with the fear and the psychosis of terror attacks. It is something that the armed forces and other security agencies in India must deal with almost daily. Islamic State was the latest standard bearer of a violent and insidious ideology that can be traced all the way back to the 1980s. We are all aware of how global Islamic militant insurgency morphed and evolved, and we all have our favorite narratives. What is undeniable is that the interconnectedness afforded by modern telecommunication and the open and porous nature of our modern liberal and inclusive societies have made us all targets. At the same time, there are states, if we can categorize them as such, that fulfill only the juridical criteria of sovereignty without being truly functional. These dysfunctional and failed states are unable to effectively police their territories. Moreover, many such states actively harbor and aid terrorist and illicit organizations, enabling them to spread their malicious activities across the region. Violent extremist ideologies are transmitted through local networks and, more importantly, through online sources. This again creates challenges for small states especially. Small states lack the means to actively monitor the darkest corners of the web, interdict such communication, disrupt operational networks, and formulate effective countermeasures. Everyone agrees that a multi-domain threat such as violent extremism and terrorism requires multi-domain, multi-agency, and multi-structured expertise to deal with, which can only be harnessed through a robust interagency mechanism, or perhaps a much more wider whole-of-government, whole-of-society approach. In the Maldives, we have established a working interagency structure led by the National Counterterrorism Center. National Counterterrorism Center acts at the moment as the nodal agency dealing with the issue of violent extremism and countering terrorism. We have also formulated very comprehensive and holistic national strategies and action plans to prevent and counter violent extremism, focused mainly on local communities, religious scholars, educational institutions, and most critically, the vulnerable youth. Just before flying out to Delhi, I was in a process to, from a subject matter point of view, I was in the process with other stake agencies to amend our existing counterterrorism law, giving more powers to intelligence agencies, share and fusion intelligence. We believe that intelligence and information sharing and intelligence is a key segment of countering terrorism. Returning to the complex international environment, we are living through a paradigm shift. Very interesting. China in the past 30 years has pulled off a massive social economic marvel, lifting 800 million people out of poverty and establishing itself as a leading industrial nation. There are still massively underdeveloped areas in China, and many strategists debate about the longevity of China's dominance, given their lopsided demographics and economic policies. They arose as a result of the system that was created by the hegemon, but now seek to revise the old system, putting them on a collision course, with the United States. The recent pivot towards a more Indian Ocean-centric focus by the US, especially with the most talked about Indo-Pacific strategy and the establishment of the Indo-Pacific Command, shows that US is unlikely to cede its dominance. This region is an economically and socially, culturally dynamic one, and critical to China's sustained rise. How does India now fit into this equation from a small state's point of view? As an Indian ocean power, India is set to play a key role, not only as a net security provider, but more importantly, as a security guarantor of peace, stability within the greater Indian Ocean region. Strategists like Graham Allison and Walls suggest that both US and China are very likely to fall into classical Thucydidean trap. That say the interconnectedness, entanglements, and ties all more make conflict less likely. Commentators such as the General Rupert Smith, who happens to be one of my favorite scholars as well, he is considered as a modern-day Clausewitz. He suggests that we have entered an era in which industrial war is obsolete, and that the wars of future would be amongst the people. And then hence, the utility of force is diminished. A very interesting thesis he has come up with. Going back to my earlier discussion on the need for small states to have a stable and norm-respecting international order, it is imperative that conflict be avoided. At the same time, this is a pivotal moment for small states also, because as states rise and others decline, there are decisions to be made. Do small states remain neutral? Do we bandwagon with the rising powers? Or try and hedge influence and autonomy? These are the deciding and most key factors for small state security. With that as a brief opening remark, now I would like to stop here and open for questions. Before that, I think it is warranted that I give an overview of the strategic direction of the Maldives too, and focus areas for the Maldives National Defense Force where our national security apparatus is headed to. Since assuming a leadership, the new government in the Maldives has been diligently working together with our key international partners in addressing our common security concerns, especially with the India. In the defense forces and even within the whole national security architecture, we have focused our attention on building collaboration, fostering cooperation, information sharing. Maldives is working to influence international, however small that influence might be. We have moved and embarked on a democratic trajectory. The hardest part about paradigm shifts is recognizing that you are living through one and finding ways to adapt. Adapting to the new security realities and reshaping the Maldives National Defense Force has been a key priority as a person who has the responsibility to head the forces now. In February of this year, we launched a very ambitious defense reform initiative. The major focus of this initiative has been to identify the peculiarities of the operational environment and the broader strategic setting and align our strategic priorities and policies. We are also developing our capabilities through a long-term perspective planning cycle. Along with it, we are also developing the needed doctrines to operationalize these capacities. So the new capstone doctrine, which has been launched recently, focuses on our new operational structure, focuses on the force structure, focuses on how we could very clearly compartmentalize the broader operational spectrum that we will be heading to in future. The Maldives National Defense Force is a highly unique organization. We have within our fold traditional offense defense oriented forces and capabilities, constabulary mandates, civil defense elements, and executive security elements. So it makes the National Defense Force unique. And the challenges that we face are again highly problematic. And when we pass down to the strategic thinkers and to the academia, we try to give the message that the Maldives National Defense Force, like Likewise, the country has been evolving. It's a force under transformation, and it's a force under transition. So there's this evolution process throughout, which we will be touching upon later in detail, given if there is any clarities required. Geography is also a major concern. Our forces are spread over 4 smaller operational commands in a space that, as I mentioned, 99.7% is ocean. At least that is what it was when I actually left the country 2 days ago. It might have increased now, I don't know. Due to global warming, perhaps. Mobility is a serious issue, as is logistical sustainment and reacting to incidents. Brigadier General Hamid, who happens to be commanding our logistics, most of our logistic units, he has also been kind enough to join the panel today. He will be able to later enlighten you on our challenges that we face when we talk about moving from the airport to the hotel, taking a boat. So imagine undertaking security operations in that kind of structure. And so the senior esteemed generals and admirals, air marshals who have been to Maldives, who had an exposure, will be able to talk. They have their first-hand experience. For example, when we had the Operation Cactus launched, it was highly challenging, and a lot of credit to Air Force. Let me also reiterate that we talk about Indian Navy constantly. We collaborate constantly with the Indian Navy for a lot of activities. Even the DA in Maldives is wearing a Navy uniform. The DA is also from the Navy. But Air Force has been always the first responder. So it's a multi-dimensional, multi-service effort when we talk about joint operations. And obviously, Army, we all are trained in Army institutions. So it is a multifaceted, multi-dimensional, multifold joint program. Very interesting indeed. Mobility is, of course, a serious issue, is logistical sustainment and reacting to different types of incidents, as I said. Tourism is expanding into all corners of our country, and outside threat vectors such as illegal, unreported, and unregulated fisheries, illicit trafficking, narco trafficking, and human trafficking are all converging all around. So our forces need a rapid increase in speed, reach, efficiency, and more importantly, mindsets to accept this change. I think I have already taken too much of time. Let us stop here, and I ask the moderator, please, if you have any questions. Thank you very much. It was indeed a great